The coronavirus mortality rate is likely much, much lower than you've been told. That and a couple of other topics will be discussed today here on the Rucker Report. I'm your host, JD Rucker, and before I get to that, let's do three quick, brief, fleeting shout-outs to three very important organizations, at least to me, and hopefully to you as well. Number one, GatekeepersOnline.com, the GK Podcast Network. This is a place where you're probably finding this Rucker Report. Hopefully you are, and if not, you should go check it out, because it's not just me. There's plenty of awesome, amazing people on here. Dustin Faulkner, Jeff Dornick, Pastor Sam Jones. The list goes on and on. People that have stalwart and strong opinions, particularly about religion. They do dabble into politics and the culture and all these other things, but this is really a very, very faith-based outlet, podcast network. So check us out, gatekeepersonline.com. Second shout out goes to my site, Knock Report, noqreport.com, where you can get the latest news, opinions, and quotes with plenty of awesome writers, such as this J.D. Rucker guy. I'm not sure who he is, but he seems very handsome and intelligent. Then there's Carrie Marasco, Chastity Mansfield, Scarlett Madison, lots of women, oh my. Great site there, I should know. But I'm not biased at all when I say that it's an amazing site. Last but not least, the American Conservative Movement. This is the movement that we started a little bit over a month ago and had our first event last weekend on Saturday that, frankly, blew me away. I didn't expect it to be as successful as it was. We had 41,000 digital attendees to the Saving America Conference, and it was so well received, we're doing it again. Coming in May 9th, set your calendars, your Google Watches, whatever it is that you do to set a time and a date. Plug it in there. Send yourself an email, text message, smoke signals, whatever. Get May 9th in the head, because that's when the next Saving America Conference put on by the American Conservative Movement is being held. So what are these studies I'm talking about here? Why is the coronavirus, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, less deadly than we're being led to believe? And the second question, the follow-up question to that is, why are we being led to believe it? Let's start with the studies. There were two of them. Last week, there was a study at Standford University. So just for clarity, in case people don't know, Standford is one of the most respected medical research facilities and organizations in the world. This isn't the Zimbabwe lab for virology or anything like that. This is real science doing real cool stuff. And I was clued into this one by Elisa Booth. She's a regular contributor over at Fox News. I don't watch much of Fox News, but when I do, she's sometimes there, I suppose. So what did this test show? What did this study show? They're showing that 50 to 85 times more people, at least in their area. So this was in Santa Clara County, I believe, California, Southern California, my neck of the woods, so I should know. 50 to 85 times more people were infected by the coronavirus than the official numbers are showing. Now, people might ask, how in the world could that be? Aren't we, the president's saying that we have enough tests? Well, that's true. We are testing those who are symptomatic and doing it at a very nice pace. Over 3 million, 4 million or so people have already been tested in the United States alone, more than any other country by far. And yet, now they're saying there's a lot more people infected than that. How could we not know? And where are they getting their data? Where does Stanford get this data from? Well, they looked into, or I should say tested, 3,300 people in the county. But they weren't testing for the virus. They were testing for antibodies. And the distinction there is that if you have the virus and it comes into your body and leaves, whether you were symptomatic or not, whether you went to the hospital or not, whether you even knew that you had been infected, your body, if it's functioning properly, will create antibodies. And they found a shocking number of people had these antibodies in their system. They did a relatively random sampling of these people across multiple sites, and they weren't looking for people who were necessarily symptomatic, but I don't think, if I recall reading the study, I don't think that they were opposed to those who were. They just wanted to see generally what happens when you test 3,330 people, adjusting for zip code, sex, race, and ethnicity. So they found that a staggering number of people had been infected. We're looking at up to 4.1% of the population had been infected. Now that blows, or that should blow everybody's mind, because that means that there were literally tens of thousands of people. This is an area that has only found, I believe at the time, around 1,000 confirmed cases. 1,000 people who had gone to the hospital, said, "Hey, I think I'm sick. I've got the coronavirus. Can you check me out?" They did the test, and it was determined, yes, you have the coronavirus. There were about 1,000 of those. And yet they're showing that somewhere between 50 and 85,000 people in the area, based on their projections, and again, this is Standford here, based on Stanford's projections, that 50 to 85,000 people in this county were actually infected at one point. Maybe they're still infected, but their bodies have developed these antibodies, and they fought off the infection. Most of them, the vast majority of them, had no idea. It came as a shock to them. The second study, and if this is alone, great. So that's good information. Who knows? Maybe Santa Clara County is different. Maybe there's something special. Maybe there's something in the water that makes them catch the disease and then kill it off quickly. Who knows? Except that there was a second study, and this one was released yesterday, and this one comes from another highly respected school, USC, the University of Southern California, in Los Angeles. And their numbers were very close to the same. Now, the number, the multiplier here is actually less. It's 28 to 55 times higher than the confirmed cases. But keep something in mind. There were a lot more confirmed cases in the area, and the percentages were higher already because it's a more congested area. So rather than looking at that number, the really important one that we need to look at is, funny enough, a very similar number. You'll see it right here if you're watching the video. If not, I'll read that number to you. It is 4.1% of the countries. That's what they're claiming. So very matching the high end of the previous study. 4.1% of the country's adult population has antibodies to the virus. Folks, this is huge. There's a few negatives, and let me touch those first. The bad part is this means that there's a whole lot of people out there who are likely infected, potentially millions of Americans who are or were infected and didn't even know it. Now, you might say, okay, so that's great for them because they got infected and they didn't get sick, they didn't die, and now they're safe. They've got the antibodies. They've essentially been quote unquote vaccinated. That's not the exact proper term, but it's not the same exact thing, but we'll stick with that for the sake of simplicity. They are potentially a high potential chance that they are now immune from it. Now, based on mutations, that could change very quickly, and they're already seeing some cases where people who were sick and recovered got sick again later. So that positive, that push for or getting people infected so that they can become immune to it may or may not be a reality, which lends to this being bad news. And then, of course, the other aspect is that means that there's millions of people, more than we thought, who are infected and infecting others. This is one of the scariest part about this disease, the thing that's made it so worrisome, more so than the flu, is that people are contagious even when they're asymptomatic. So that means you could be feeling perfectly fine, you could be carrying the virus, and you could go have a tea and crumpets with your grandmother and get her infected. And she could get infected, and you may never even know that you were infected. Be like, man, how in the world did she get it? I didn't get it. I wasn't sick. I never got sick. But then you check the antibodies, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, so you were sick. So those are negatives. That's the bad part. But the good part, and this is the important part, the real takeaway from this, is that the actual mortality rate from infections is so much lower than anybody believes. It is lower than, in most cases, even the flu. Now, granted, the flu has a different type of of spread. It's not nearly as contagious. I'm not one of those, oh, this is just the flu, don't worry about it. Hey, look, I'm worried about the coronavirus. I do my social distancing. I don't even need the government to tell me to do it. I would do it anyway. I would keep my family locked up in the house, okay? And not for bad reasons. I would keep them here locked up and made sure that they didn't go out, even if everybody said, hey, it's A-okay, go out there. Because I do have a concern. Of course, I have, there are reasons that I don't want my family to get sick that I won't go into. But point being is that I'm pulling a Joe Biden. I don't even remember what the point I was trying to make here was. So, it's the thing. The thing, that's the point. I do fear and have a concern. Fear is probably the wrong word. I have a concern about the coronavirus. And so I'm not trying to say that this is just the flu. But what I will say is that if these numbers pan out, and I mean, first and foremost, this hasn't been peer reviewed. Okay, I do trust that 2 separate studies at 2 different universities, granted within relatively close proximity of each other, but still in different counties, 2 different universities of high repute have come to the same basic conclusion, then we can assume that there's a very good chance that this is accurate. The same type of study needs to happen everywhere. Everywhere. Texas, Idaho, New York for sure. I would imagine that if this is what's happening in California with 7,000 or 8,000 or so confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the test area, and they're now saying that it's likely 28 to 55 times higher than that. Imagine what that means for New York City or Detroit or any of the other places that have been hit hard by this. It's worrisome. But then again, there's also a lot of hope. This tells us that if the numbers pan out, that we're looking at more closer to, instead of 3.4, 3.8% mortality rate, which is what they're saying now, it's actually more likely closer to about 0.1%. So, and to put that into perspective, that's approximately one out of every 1,000 people who get infected will die from this disease. I'm not saying that's good. The bulk of this disease, the fact that it has spread to so many people and has killed so many, does make it a serious thing that we need to fight. But it also tells us something else. It tells us that those who are healthy, who do not have pre-existing conditions, who are young, at least under 50, these people are very, very likely to not die if they get the coronavirus, as well as not even get sick from it. It's time to start looking at this from an economic perspective, from a rights perspective, and saying no more. Okay, we're done. We did the social distancing. We'll keep doing it voluntarily, but open up business. Let's get people back to work, because the coronavirus could kill us 1 out of 1,000, but 22 million people in the United States, that's over 5%. We're talking about approaching is 8% of the population that is unemployed. Okay, and that includes kids, so they're unemployed no matter what. So if that many people, if that high of a percentage are unemployed, not getting money, becoming beholden and dependent on government, if they can be, others cannot be, what does that mean? That means that the actual toil from this quote-unquote solution of a lockdown could be much worse and much harder on the United States in the short and long term as the coronavirus itself, especially considering these new numbers. So I urge the president and the vice president and Dr. Birx and all these people, they listen to this. They're going to watch this video for sure. And so when you guys see it, I'm saying, look, take this into consideration. Look at these studies. Get the government science team behind this. Get them peer reviewing it and doing these studies everywhere else. And let's find out if this is true. And if it is, then let's open up the country. Okay, let's keep the sicker people, the at-risk people, let's keep them protected. Let's continue to practice social distancing at a reasonable, within reason. But otherwise, let's get back to normal. Let's try to return to some sense of normalcy in this world. Now, there's going to be a new normal. This isn't going to be something where, okay, great, open up for business now, everything's hunky-dory. That's not going to happen. But we need to start, because the longer this lockdown continues, the harder it's going to be to recover from it. It's already going to be extremely difficult, even if the lockdown were lifted today. So I said there was a second question. Why have you not heard about this? Why is this not being widely reported? Two very interesting things. First and foremost, I found the narratives being spread by mainstream media. Most of them I wouldn't even show you because they're just so ridiculous. But they all focus basically on what we're seeing here. If you're seeing it on video, this is an article from CNBC that the headline is "Coronavirus Antibody Testing Shows LA County Outbreak is Up to 55 Times Bigger Than Reported Cases." Oh, wow. Bad, right? Well, yeah, but like I said, there is that negative. But the bigger news is that the mortality rate is lower. And in our society, headlines determine narrative. Headlines are what a large percentage of people read. They don't go past the headline. They get their data, scrolling through Twitter, going through their news feeds, looking at headlines shared on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and they see the headline and they make their conclusion from there. And so when they see this, I would say at least a strong minority, if not even a majority of people who see this and don't read it will be like, holy crap, this is terrible. The coronavirus is worse than we thought. We got to lock it down even further. And that's the narrative that's being pushed. I didn't see any other sites, any other news outlets out there leading with the big part of the story that the mortality rate is much, 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 much lower than what's being reported. That would actually give people hope. And mainstream media doesn't want us to have hope. They don't want us to be opening up for business. They don't want us to be taking care of ourselves. They, like the Democrats, want us to be beholden to government. They know this is good for the Democratic Party. They know that this would be bad for President Trump. They want the lockdown to continue for as long as they can push it. Okay, as long as they can push it. I won't go so far as to say that it was a hoax. I don't think it was. I really don't. And I'm not one of those conspiracy theorists who thinks this was a biological weapon of some sort. But I will say that the data that we're getting now, so far after the fact, this is data that they could have been collecting long ago. This didn't have to happen in April. This could have been happening literally in February. January was probably too early, but February, this kind of stuff should have been looked into. And yet it wasn't. It's not because they couldn't. It's because nobody was willing to. Nobody wanted to. Granted, nobody was expecting it to get this bad. Who am I kidding? They were expecting it to be much worse. They were saying 2.2 million dead. Such craziness. Anyway, coffee. Hold on. Good stuff. It's a good, wonderful Tuesday morning to get this kind of data out there. I'm going to close out with something that I have not independently verified this, so take it with a grain of salt, but I will put this link on my Twitter account. It's at JD Rucker, so you can check out this video. I'm not going to play it again because the audio is terrible, but long story short, this was an open or a hot mic where they're in the White House press room, and there's some people that are walking around, press people, and they're actually talking about the USC study, and you have them saying things like was this a hoax, or actually the quote was, so it was a hoax. And this is what Wayne Dupree from the Wayne Dupree show, that's what he latched onto. But the funny part is he doesn't mention that in part of the conversation there was like, yeah, everybody here's already been vaccinated. What? What do you mean? What? Excuse me? Yeah, they actually said that everybody there in the press room had already been vaccinated. And there are a handful of people in there, and nobody's like jumping up and saying, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean vaccine? How have you been vaccinated? I don't want to start conspiracy theories. I have not verified this video independently. But everything I've found from Wayne Dupree so far has been pretty darn spot on. So check out the video. I'm sure he'll probably have it pinned. He should have it pinned to the top of his Twitter account at Wayne Dupree Show, and I'll have it on mine as well. I'll have it in the show notes. I'll have it everywhere at JD Rucker, as well as at the Rucker Report. So anyway, bottom line is this. We have good news coming out about the coronavirus. News that should be affecting our public policy. Not just at the state level, not just at the local level, but also at the national level. And yet we're seeing nothing. No reporting from mainstream media. No politicians talking about this. It's something's afoul. This doesn't make any sense. This stuff should be the biggest story of the last 2 weeks, and yet nothing. Barely any coverage, and the mainstream media that is covering it is highlighting the bad, not the good. If there are millions of people out there with antibodies, with potentially that are immune to this disease, and there are millions of people out there who have been sick, who have been infected but did not get sick, that's the kind of information that Americans need to know. This needs to be broken down, especially that number. If they're looking at the 0.1% number, and that's still applicable across the board, not just in California. If that's the case, then again, we're talking about 1 out of every 1,000 people who are infected who will die from this. And considering that if we protect the ill, protect those with pre-existing conditions, protect the frail, the elderly, even the young, keep most people who are most easily affected by this, keep them safe, and let the rest of us get back to work and open up our businesses and try to fix this problem before we get another $2 trillion bailout sitting in our... don't even get me started on that whole thing. This is the Rucker Report. Sorry for ending it on a downer, but man, this stuff just ticks me off. I'll see you guys next time. God bless.